A gang of men viciously attacked the traitor, striking him with bats and metal beams. Their blows were so fierce that blood streamed down from his head. Hewoon stood frozen as the agonized cries echoed around him. Fear gripped him tightly, knowing that revealing his presence would seal his fate. His entire body shook with fear, yet he remained silent, wishing over and over that he had never come to this place. The traitor fell to his knees in front of Wu, pleading desperately for forgiveness. However, the young master remained unmoved, showing no mercy toward those who had betrayed him. At the sight of the man, Wu's expression contorted with disgust. Unable to hide his revulsion, he took matters into his own hands by snatching a beam from a subordinate nearby. Without warning, he thrust the object directly into the traitor's hand, causing the man to cry out in greater pain, while the young master responded with nothing more than a dismissive scoff. With a sly grin, Wu announced his intention to kill the man, promising that his death would be so degrading it would leave a lasting stain on his reputation. He felt a sense of amusement, aware that his men would enjoy themselves as he observed from a distance. The man understands his fate and lets out another terrified scream, begging desperately for mercy, though his cries go unheard. Hewoon stays completely silent, his unease growing with every passing moment, forced to depend solely on his imagination to picture the events unfolding behind his back. He feels completely lost, paralyzed by fear. The terror inside him only grows stronger when Wu's gaze finally lands on him. The young master seizes the man's hair, pulling him nearer and demanding an explanation for why he was followed to the warehouse that day. Hewoon felt the pressure on him ease bit by bit, allowing him to calm his shaking voice and direct his attention toward the person holding him captive. Wu watched him with sincere interest. The boy wondered why this man had been following him everywhere today, instead of just showing up outside his house at 8 like he normally did. Hewoon's mind raced with anxiety, struggling to find a way to explain himself. In his confusion, he deflected by questioning how Wu had discovered the truth in the first place. The day felt unreal to him. Not only was someone losing their life before his eyes, but he had also just been discovered following someone without their knowledge. At that moment, the immediate concern wasn't the underlying issue. The only thing that counted was finding a way to get out safely, since the traitor's destiny might just become his as well. Wu's frustration mounted as his inquiries went unanswered, prompting him to seize Wu's chin in a firm grip, asserting his authority by making it clear that he had spoken first. Recently, Hewoon had been observing his classmates with such focus that he ended up falling asleep outside his own home. When he finally opened his eyes, the clock showed 11 at night, later than he had ever been out before. Most people would agree that his actions had crossed the line, making him seem more like a criminal than anything else, as his obsession had turned into outright stalking. Hewoon made up his mind to head home and thought about hailing a taxi. Just then he noticed a light switch on inside Wu's house, a sign that Wu hadn't gone to bed yet. Seeing this, Hewoon reconsidered his plans. Wu, who shared the same class as Wu, had a way of making Wu nervous for hours with nothing more than a casual, uninterested hello. He observed him closely wherever he went, hoping to discover whether he spent time with friends or had someone special in his life. Hewoon's joy was unmistakable upon discovering that Wu possessed neither of the things in question. Around most people, he acted aloof and unapproachable, yet when it came to Hewoon, his demeanor shifted to one of surprising warmth and friendliness. Following him had come naturally, particularly since their paths always aligned after class. Though Hewoon felt uncertain about whether this was wise, he continued anyway and ultimately learned where Wu's home was. Hewoon couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy as he took in the impressive house, particularly since gossip claimed its owner was a third-generation Kaibal. The truth of the matter held no importance for him. What truly counted was being the sole person from their university aware of Wu's address. The excitement of this secret knowledge swept over Hewoon, making him ignore any thoughts that what he was doing might be wrong. In his mind, he wasn't committing any offense, he wasn't installing secret cameras or snapping pictures or anything similar. He simply observed the scene, lingering longer than he meant to that evening. Realizing the time, he chose to summon a taxi to take him home. Fortunately, this would prove useful, though not for returning home as originally intended. Dressed sharply in a suit, Wu exited his home as his subordinates welcomed him and guided him toward a waiting car. Hewoon believed the man was on his way to a club, so he chose to keep shadowing him for a bit more. He told the taxi driver to keep following the vehicle in front of them. His eyes sparkled with eager excitement as he longed for a chance to catch a glimpse of Wu at the club. Despite his efforts to convince himself otherwise, Hewoon couldn't shake the feeling that their destination was nothing like a club. The taxi fare had drained 50,000 won from his wallet, leaving him questioning whether the trip was worth it. Still, with everything that had happened so far, turning back no longer felt like an option. No matter what happened next, he was on the verge of witnessing a hidden aspect of Wu that remained a secret from everyone else. When he looked inside, he saw several men gathered together, and among them one was kneeling in front of Wu. Recently, Hee-woon had begun to sense something unusual, particularly whenever he thought about the work that Wu was doing. Concealed behind a stack of crates, the blonde-haired individual strained to hear the commotion, eventually realizing that a conflict was unfolding nearby. Uncertainty clouded his mind. Doubts crept in about whether trailing after Wu had ever been the right choice. However, the point of no return had long since passed. After seeing something dangerous unfold, he found himself uncertain about his next move. He hesitated between escaping the scene or remaining hidden to become a potential witness he could inform others about later. Because his subordinate had erred, Wu resolved to discipline him, and the consequences he planned were anything but mild. Hee-woon crouched in his hiding place, his entire body shaking with terror even though his own safety was at stake. When the group discovered his whereabouts and began their interrogation, shock rendered him speechless, which resulted in someone striking him sharply across the cheek. Blood ran down his lip, and although Wu had been the one to inflict the injury, he appeared far from satisfied with the outcome. He grew even more irritated by the boy's refusal to obey, so he demanded that the boy pay attention and respond whenever he was addressed. Wu repeated his question, wanting to know the reason for Woon's presence. Shaking with anxiety, Woon confessed that he had been secretly trailing Wu. Wu grew increasingly annoyed as the other man's confession came out between choking sobs and streaming tears. Frustrated, Wu repeated his threat, demanding that the man pull himself together and answer clearly. Using his sleeve to brush away his tears, Woon at last found the composure to speak without confusion. He revealed that curiosity had driven him to follow, believing that Wu was on his way to a club. After reflecting for a while, Wu realized that the probably feared other men would try to flirt with him. The thought entertained him, prompting him to explain how he had discovered that Hee-woon had been following him. From the very start, it was clear to everyone. The way he carried himself left no doubt that he intended to go after him. In a rush of anxiety, Hee-woon confessed his mistake, offered a sincere apology, and promised that he would never repeat his actions. Wu, however, saw things differently. He believed that Hee-woon's persistence in following him revealed a deeper desire for something beyond what was obvious. Hee-woon felt a wave of surprise and embarrassment wash over him, his instincts urging him to turn down the offer. Wu calmly explained that being turned down would hurt his feelings, since at that moment he truly desired him. Despite his continued reluctance, Hee-woon claimed the idea had never crossed his mind, yet Wu repeated his proposal once more. While Hee-woon removed his clothes, uncertainty crept into his mind about the choices he had made. Believing the opportunity was ideal, he picked up his phone with the intention of contacting the authorities. He was discovered while committing the deed, and despite all his attempts to justify himself, the evidence left no room for doubt. Hee-woon understood that his life was in danger just as the traitors had been, so he collapsed to the ground, pleading desperately for forgiveness. Although Wu harbored no plans to end the man's life just yet, he intended to extract what he needed first. At a certain moment, Hee-woon lost consciousness, completely oblivious to his surroundings and what was being done to him. Upon regaining awareness, a touch of fear crept over him. Wu stood before him, a broad grin spreading across his face as he nonchalantly requested that everything remain confidential. Hee-woon had already decided to keep the murder a secret, so he offered calming assurances that the truth would remain unspoken. Wu was already aware of his mother's illness and that his brother was living in the Philippines at the time. Should Hee-woon reveal what had happened that night, those closest to him would face the consequences before anyone else. Wu had strictly instructed him to stay silent about the murder, though there was no restriction on discussing the events that followed. Flashing a sly grin, Wu offered a farewell and assured him that their paths would cross again at the university the following Monday. Back at their house, concern filled Hee-woon's mother as she noticed her son had been shut away in the bathroom far longer than normal. She repeatedly wondered about his well-being, though her concern went unheard. Hee-woon had already started the water, letting its rushing noise cover up everything else. He was so overwhelmed with nausea that he spent hours sitting beside the toilet, only managing to regain his composure after a long struggle. His mother believed he was just overindulging in alcohol and continued to offer her assistance. Hee-woon finally emerged from behind the door, putting on a gentle smile as he apologized for causing her concern. The sight of his battered face took her by surprise, leaving her breathless. A storm of questions flooded her thoughts, yet she never managed to voice any before the moment slipped away. Hee-woon interrupted her attempts to speak, his voice unsteady as he insisted that he had only tripped and injured himself, though the explanation was clearly false. She doubted his words, yet she acted as if she trusted him, fully aware that he would never reveal the real story. She swiftly redirected the conversation and attended to his needs, placing a set of clean clothes just outside his room. In the end, she found herself unable to stay silent and softly urged him not to face his hardships by himself, letting him know he could turn to her for help if he ever needed financial support. At that moment, Hee-woon lost his composure and shouted that all of their money was being carefully saved to settle their outstanding debt. Her thoughts were clouded by concern for her sons, making it hard for her to think clearly. She believed that her youngest son had suffered a beating as a direct result of her eldest son's failure in business. Hee-woon, eager to avoid her worries, gently moved her aside with a reassuring smile, silently promising that everything would turn out all right. After locking himself inside the bathroom, he sank to the floor with his back against the door, allowing his feelings to overwhelm him as tears streamed down his face. He would return to class with Woo starting on Monday. Just a week ago, everything seemed normal, but now his entire world felt turned upside down. He felt a deep sense of fear gripping him. The only thing keeping him from fleeing in silence was his scholarship. He made a conscious effort to distance himself from Woo, choosing solitude and steering clear of the spotlight. Hee-woon believed that survival depended on avoiding any actions that might anger him, holding on to that hope as his only chance. His optimism crumbled instantly upon entering the lecture hall, where he found Woo already seated, looking as though he had anticipated his arrival from the very beginning. Woo, who was known for his habit of being tardy, surprised Hee-woon by turning up ahead of him for once, interrupted his train of thought, and instructed him to move aside so he wouldn't block the doorway. Hee-woon stepped aside to allow his classmate through, then moved back into the hallway, his hand pressed tightly against his face. The events from that night replayed in his mind, filling him with a wave of nausea. All he wished for was to stay far away from Woo, yet he knew that as long as there were people around, Woo wouldn't dare harm him. Summoning his courage, Hee-woon quietly entered the lecture hall and made his way to a distant corner, wishing to avoid drawing anyone's attention. Woo watched the other person leave, a sly smile playing on his lips as he anticipated meeting them again. Throughout the morning, Hee-woon skillfully kept out of Woo's line of sight, relying on what he had learned about Woo's routine from secretly observing him. He had just a single tutoring session scheduled for the day, so he planned to return home early and relax before it began. His mind wandered so deeply that he failed to see someone standing ahead. As a result, he collided with them forcefully, causing his phone to slip from his grasp and fall to the ground. Overcome with panic, he quickly crouched to retrieve the fallen object, quietly expressing his regret for his lack of attention. He never got the opportunity, as Woo stepped down firmly, pinning his hand to the floor and forcing a soft cry from his lips. Woo felt bothered when Hee-woon apologized while avoiding his gaze, interpreting the gesture as a lack of respect. Hee-woon slowly raised his eyes, his entire body stiffening as fear surged through him at the unexpected presence of Woo. Frozen in place, he braced himself for disaster, fear gripping him so tightly that he couldn't even bring himself to reach for his phone. Noticing the other boy standing still, Woo extended his hand, offering assistance. Hee-woon's anxiety intensified, and he let out a startled cry while stumbling away in fear. A wave of panic overwhelmed him, making his breathing uneven and causing his whole body to shake. Woo let out a sharp laugh, then seized his jacket with a firm grip and hauled him upright. Hee-woon cried out in panic, fighting to break free, and desperately mentioned that he was supposed to go to work that day. Woo, aware that his work wouldn't begin until 8:30, remained composed and warned the other person to act properly if he wished to avoid another beating. A car stood parked close to them. Without allowing Hee-woon any say in the matter, Woo forcefully pushed him into the vehicle. He wasted no time and confronted Woon, wanting to know the reason for Woon's recent avoidance. Hee-woon couldn't shake the feeling that he had been taken advantage of and then tossed aside, yet he desperately tried to convince himself otherwise. Overcome with panic, he hurriedly justified his decision, believing it was safer for him to remain unseen. After a moment, he took a deep breath, his nerves settling. He confessed that fear was the only thing holding him back. Woo extended his hand, softly brushing the other person's cheek, and wondered aloud whether the tears had come from fear or something else. Hee-woon admitted that he had spent the weekend in tears, which explained the tired look in his eyes. Woo held his chin thoughtfully, quietly admitting that thoughts of the other person had occupied his mind throughout the weekend. Hee-woon, his body shaking, told a falsehood, claiming he had been thinking about the other person as well, even though his mind had actually been elsewhere. Believing that their emotions matched, Woo released his hold and proposed that they visit his home to have dinner together. Unsure of Woon's preferences, he chose to prepare a Korean meal. Hee-woon expressed his gratitude for the gesture, yet he simply gazed at the meal in front of him, unable to find the will to take a single bite. Woo caught sight of Hee-woon's sour expression and couldn't help but let a sly smile cross his face. He remembered clearly how much Hee-woon used to long for the chance to be inside his home. Hee-woon recoiled slightly as he confessed the truth, a response that seemed to amuse Woo. With a relaxed air, Woo announced that from that moment forward they would be sharing their meals. Hee-woon felt uneasy about the suggestion, so he carefully mentioned that he still had no plans to reveal what happened that night to anyone. Woo's actions gave the impression that he was monitoring him closely, though Woo insisted this wasn't the case. According to Woo, there was no need for such vigilance, as he was certain the other would remain silent. Hee-woon appeared to be nothing but a timid, easily manipulated puppy, always trembling and quick to obey. Unable to disagree, Hee-woon bowed his head in silence, continuing to avoid the meal in front of him. He considered reaching out to the authorities, yet their dependability was questionable. Weighing his choices, he wondered if slipping away might be the safer path. He wondered if escape was possible for him, just as it had been for his brother. Yet uncertainty lingered, making him question whether fleeing was truly the best choice. A sharp, impatient tone jolted him back to reality, calling out his name, Woo. Hee-woon's moody silence resurfaced, and the sight irritated him. He felt baffled, believing he hadn't caused any reason for this behavior. Hee-woon chuckled softly, remarking that steering clear of Woo was, in the end, a simple task. Before he managed to complete his thought, Woo seized a handful of his hair. All day long, he had kept a close eye on the other, realizing with certainty that despite every effort made, there was truly no place left to conceal oneself. Hee-woon, gripped by fear, pleaded desperately for forgiveness, confessing that he had been foolish to ever entertain such thoughts. Woo often found his patience pushed to the limit by the boy, who seemed to follow instructions only after being struck. Hee-woon's anxiety surged, his eyes filling with tears as he desperately begged for release. Despite his struggles, the hold on him remained unbreakable. Woo let out a frustrated click of his tongue before letting go of the other person. With a soft pat on the shoulder, he urged him to sit up straight. Despite his efforts to stay calm, the situation continued to bother him. Hee-woon shook with visible fear, his demeanor marked by a pitiful vulnerability that left no doubt about his terror. Woo leaned closer and quietly reminded him through a whisper that he was supposed to respond whenever someone addressed him. Once he received an appropriate reply, he released his hold, feeling confident that Hee-woon would at last begin to pay attention to him. Rather than receiving compliance, he encountered a response that was even more unfavorable. Hee-woon pressed his hands tightly against his lips, his body shaking with relentless hiccups that refused to subside despite all his efforts. Feeling irritated, Woo instructed the other person to get to his feet, as he had an idea he wanted to test out. Hee-woon's anxiety resurfaced, which only served to further agitate Woo. Woo grew frustrated, thinking he had already explained the right way to reply. After pausing for a moment, Hee-woon stood up cautiously, steeling himself in anticipation of being struck. However, events took a different turn. Woo drew him closer and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. Hee-woon struggled to break free, yet the hold on him remained unyielding, making escape impossible. The kiss brushed against Hee-woon's lips with unexpected tenderness, leaving him puzzled by the sudden shift in how he was being treated. With a soft whimper, he eventually broke free, his mind only faintly catching Woo's confession about being utterly captivated by him. Noticing that Woo's hiccups had finally ceased, the brunette gently gestured for him to return to his seat and continue his meal. The following day, Hee-woon attended class, keeping to himself and avoiding contact with others as much as he could. A short time earlier, he had gotten a message from the mother of the student he was tutoring. The woman explained that her child had expressed dissatisfaction, which led her to choose to stop the lessons with him and request a refund. Hee-woon chose not to protest, believing that accepting the outcome was wiser despite it signifying total defeat. He was almost out of money, uncertain about how he would make it through the coming weeks. All at once, a wave of misfortune overwhelmed him. He faced his mother's battle with liver cancer, the aftermath of his father's suicide, and the heavy burden of debt that remained when the family business failed. To make matters worse, his brother had disappeared with the funds that were supposed to settle the debt. Although the situation was not ideal, he realized it was an improvement over how things had been in the past. Hee-woon was on the verge of laughing at the idea, but then he was startled by the sudden sound of Woo speaking from behind him. Since she couldn't spot a more suitable place to sit, the brunette chose the spot next to him. A thick silence lingered in the air, broken now and then by the distant voices of other students talking nearby. Hee-woon's spirits sank lower, and he found himself repeatedly casting furtive looks at Woo, certain that Woo had chosen that seat intentionally. Woo suddenly remembered his damaged phone and wondered aloud about its whereabouts, while someone nearby continued to watch him closely. Hee-woon claimed that everything was all right, even though it wasn't true. Meanwhile, Woo's attention lingered on Hee-woon's troubled expression, his curiosity growing about the real reason behind it. Hee-woon couldn't understand the hidden meaning behind the words. To him, it seemed straightforward. He was simply in a foul mood. Wu's frustration grew stronger. Despite looking after Woon and making sure he ate, Woon still missed class the following day and refused to answer Wu's phone calls. Woon had once admired him so much that he would trail after him everywhere, but now all Woon did was try to escape his presence. Woon's anxiety spiked as he desperately searched for a reason, insisting he had been ill with a stomachache the day before and had spent the entire day asleep. He struggled to show that staying away from was not intentional, but before he realized what was happening, tears began streaming down his face. The brunette felt a wave of revulsion at the sight of tears, but he restrained his reaction. Trusting Woon's words, he reached out and gently patted Woon's head, hoping to offer some comfort. Wu's interest was piqued as he inquired about the other person's breakfast, his mind already racing with ideas for their upcoming lunch destination. Woon, still trying to compose himself, pulled his hood down over his head and quietly mentioned that he had already eaten ramen. Without warning, his phone vibrated with multiple alerts, all sent by one of his students' mothers. Woon's muscles tightened, anxiety washing over him as he wondered if she was upset and considering ending their lessons too. Before he had a chance to grab his phone, Wu swiftly intercepted and took it, determined to see who he had been communicating with. He chose to ignore the messages and went straight to the call history, making sure Woon could see the long list of times he had tried to reach out. Woon paused for a moment, uncertain, then inquired if the number belonged to the other person. He quickly expressed regret for missing the call, explaining that he hadn't recognized the number. He believed the unfamiliar call was from debt collectors and chose not to answer. Once Woon saved the number, curiosity got the better of him, and he wondered aloud about how the number had been obtained in the first place. Wu responded with a quiet chuckle, confident as always in his ability to obtain any information he desired without difficulty. Once their class had ended, just as they had planned earlier, the group made their way to Wu's home to share a meal together. Woon barely paid attention, his focus absorbed by messages he exchanged with a classmate regarding their group assignment. Wu grew increasingly irritated, so he intentionally pressed his foot down on Wu's to force him to notice. He recognized exactly who Woon was messaging and could predict the reply without effort, so he reminded Woon to pay attention to their meal. Woon shifted uneasily, the lingering pain in his stomach making him feel unsettled. He also lacked enthusiasm for the project, showing little interest in getting started. Eventually, he came to understand that it would have been wiser to simply turn down the opportunity from the beginning. While in class, the professor instructed everyone to create groups of 3 or 4 students. Having already chosen to partner with Woon, Wu realized they still needed to find another teammate. Before anyone had a chance to choose, someone else stepped forward and offered to do it, changing the situation for better or worse. Wu felt indifferent on the surface, yet a spark of irritation flickered within him as Jin dared to lay a hand on Woon, regardless of the fact that it seemed harmless and friendly. Woon's concentration was interrupted when the brunette abruptly questioned whether he had made any progress in understanding the situation. Woon didn't understand the meaning behind the words, but the question made him instantly uneasy. Wu gently dabbed his lips with a napkin and in a composed manner pointed out that a full week had passed since they had last seen each other. After enduring such a long wait, he finally felt ready to revisit the memories of that night at the warehouse. Before anything else unfolded, Woon hurried into the bathroom, feigning the need for a shower in an attempt to buy some time. He cleaned himself thoroughly 2 times, yet the hands of the clock hardly advanced at all. He waited anxiously for his tutoring session to begin, eager for a reason to make his exit. As he prepared to take a 3rd shower, his eyes were drawn to an unexpected sight reflected in the mirror. Faint bruises remained scattered across his skin. A wave of anxiety swept over him as he realized that lingering any longer would only provoke Wu, who might retaliate with even harsher injuries. Without warning, the bathroom door swung open and Wu appeared, his expression filled with annoyance. With a furrowed brow, he wondered aloud about the number of times Woon intended to continue bathing. Woon, caught off guard, hurriedly explained that his only intention was to be thoroughly clean, hoping it would make the experience better for the other person. Wu let out a quiet laugh as he moved nearer, pointing out that noises from the bathroom carried easily beyond its walls. He remarked that to him, those sounds seemed rather questionable. Woon recoiled as Wu lifted his hand, bracing himself in fear that a strike was imminent. The brunette, however, was thinking along completely different lines. He moved in swiftly, pinning Woon against the wall with the clear intention of closing the distance between them immediately. Ultimately, the result turned out to be every bit as terrifying as anyone might have feared. Although Woon wasn't feeling well, he decided to attend his tutoring session anyway. Despite the lesson unfolding before him, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Wu's remarkable patience occupied his mind, but an even more pressing concern gnawed at him, his growing hunger. The student felt uncomfortable whenever his teacher ate in his presence, even something as small as a chocolate bar, and requested that he refrain from doing so. The student also expressed frustration, mentioning that Hee-woon had recently become less dedicated during their lessons. Hee-woon had once put in great effort, doing his utmost even though his speech was never flawless. However, things had shifted lately and the student could not help but observe the difference. Before the lesson even began, Hee-woon moved slowly and without energy, which made the student suspect that he was having a hard time getting ready for the upcoming midterm exams. He had not brought up the subject with his mother, but he urged Hee-woon to approach his lessons with greater dedication. Absorbed the words deeply, making a silent vow to improve, and before long the class came to a close. During the journey home on the bus, he began to think deeply about what the student had said. Fortunately, he barely had a moment to reflect before exhaustion overwhelmed him, leaving him teetering on the edge of sleep. Sleep was out of the question for him as the deadline for the group project loomed closer, and he could only hope to catch a bit of rest before the clock struck 3 in the morning. Since classes began at 9 o'clock, he intended to get up by 7, get ready, attend his lessons, then go for a stroll before settling down to review for his test. He also had a lunch meeting planned with Wu, which meant they would have to spend time together, a situation he was not looking forward to at all. Without warning, his focus shifted when he noticed a cluster of students nearby. The group was deep in conversation, discussing their grades and upcoming exams, while sharing laughter over what they intended to do once their tests were finished. Hee-woon grew more interested in the discussion unfolding before him, yet a sense of jealousy tugged at him simultaneously. The moment they stepped off the bus, he suddenly began to cry, overwhelmed by the weight of his own struggles. The following day, all 3 group members met up before starting their project work. Apologized for his absence at their previous gathering, explaining that unforeseen family issues had required his attention. Woon remained unfazed, prioritizing the project just as much as the upcoming exam. He understood that if Jin didn't grasp the content, presenting it effectively would be impossible. Appeared unconcerned and calmly placed a reassuring hand on Hye-woon's shoulder, offering silent comfort through his gesture. Observing from the sidelines, Woo's annoyance grew with each passing moment. He couldn't help but notice how frequently Jin made contact with Woon, and it bothered him deeply. Eventually, he reached his limit. Requested that they forward the completed materials to him. Wu suddenly interrupted and pointed out that the project deadline was fast approaching, with only 3 days left until Monday. He observed that Hee-woon had invested significant effort into collecting the materials, and the discomfort on Hee-woon's face made this fact even more apparent. Shin showed no signs of worry and confidently mentioned that with a little more practice, he would be able to deliver it impressively. Wu proposed that the group go over the presentation as a team, ensuring that all members understood and agreed on the final version. He suggested they do the work at his place, surprising Hye-woon and making him uneasy. Ultimately, all 3 made their way to Wu's house. Upon arrival, Jin was unable to hide his astonishment and admired the elegance of the place. Despite receiving praise, Wu remained unfazed. He redirected everyone's attention back to the project, insisting that they concentrate on their work. While the rest of the group continued their heated discussion, Hee-woon noticed something unusual. Despite Ha-jin's earlier excuse about being too busy with family issues to meet, he still managed to visit Wu's home. Despite everything, work eventually began. When requested to look at the presentation, Woon felt a jolt of surprise, remembering he had already emailed it 2 days earlier, which should have given plenty of time to go over it. After offering some excuses, eventually reviewed the work and appeared genuinely impressed by the significant progress that had already been made. While waiting, Hee-woon reached for a hoping it would curb his hunger. Wu observed the situation and declared his intention to keep a closer watch on Hee-woon's eating habits from that moment forward. Entered the discussion, grinning as he slung his arm around Woon's neck and remarked on Woon's slender frame. Hee-woon let out a sharp cry as pain shot through him, while Wu's eyebrows lifted in unexpected astonishment. Was preparing to release his grip, but then his gaze fell upon an unusual mark on Woon's neck, causing him to hesitate. He couldn't help but laugh, surprised that someone with his background could have a girlfriend. That moment pushed things over the edge. Wu could no longer contain his frustration. Rising suddenly from his seat, he snatched a cup off the table. With confident steps, he brought the object down in a swift motion, striking his head with force. Everything unfolded in an instant. Blood spread across the carpet, staining it deep red, while Wu's hands dripped with fresh crimson. Annoyance flickered across his face as he took in the chaotic scene before him. Despite everything, his thoughts remained fixed on Hee-woon, whose face was pale with shock from the disturbing scene he had just seen. Hee-woon trembled with fear and surprise, unable to muster a single word in reply to Woo's inquiry. Remained conscious, letting out weak sounds that grated on Woo's nerves, his annoyance deepening as he glanced at his now ruined carpet. Without hesitation, Woo reached out to his trusted contacts and instructed them to arrive quickly to handle the situation and clear away the chaos. Before long, the body was taken away, and he received assurance that the carpet would be switched out by the following day. As the brown-haired man conversed with his team, Hee-woon's mind was preoccupied with thoughts of their unwavering devotion to Woo. Their loyalty ran so deep that they acted as if the recent events had never occurred. For the first time, Hee-woon truly felt a deep fear that disobedience could lead him to share the same grim destiny. Without warning, a hand rested on his shoulder, causing him to jump in surprise. Woo's sharp gaze was fixed on him, leaving Woo frozen and uncertain about how to react. With the subordinates out of sight, Woo focused all his attention on him. He noticed that Hee-woon was shaking, and although no clear reason was given, it was clear to him that fear was the cause. Hee-woon, gathering his resolve, nervously inquired about the reason behind Woo's assault on Jin. Woo's dissatisfaction with Jin's performance, or more accurately, his total inactivity, was the initial conclusion that entered his mind. Woo found the assumption so entertaining that he chose to go along with it, eager to see where it might lead. He squeezed Hee-woon's shoulder more firmly, silently admitting to himself that his suspicion was correct. The fact that Jin hadn't lifted a finger had truly angered him. Seizing the opportunity, Woo moved closer, determined to pursue his desires. However, his intentions were quickly thwarted. A phone vibrated on the table, indicating that work required his focus and that Hee-woon's time there had come to an end. Hee-woon felt a wave of relief as he was finally allowed to leave, but something caught him off guard, a farewell present. He received food offered under the pretense of kindness. He took the container with a thankful expression, unwilling to turn it down, and this gesture appeared to greatly please Woo. The following morning, news quickly spread among everyone that had been involved in an accident and was currently recovering in a VIP hospital room. They too sensed something odd, almost as though it had been intentional. Meanwhile, Hee-woon kept quiet, choosing only to observe from the edge of the group. No matter how hard he tried to push thoughts out of his mind, the constant mentions from those around him made it impossible to forget. Final exams and tutoring should have been his top priorities. After this day wrapped up and he completed his review for the final subject, he thought he would at last be able to relax, but then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He figured it was probably a message from a parent of one of his students. His heart sank as soon as he noticed the name flashing across the screen. Woo. He couldn't help but hope it was just one of the students' parents calling instead. As Hee-woon exited the library, he at last responded to the ringing phone. Woo showed clear irritation over the delay in being picked up and instructed Woo to meet him at the parking lot located behind the building. Although Woo was confused about the reason, he realized he had no option but to comply. Exhausted from barely 2 hours of rest, he worried that he might faint in the middle of class, making his situation even worse. Still, Woo remained completely unconcerned. After some time, he reached the parking area and noticed that there were 2 vehicles parked there. He narrowed his eyes at the row of license plates, racking his brain to figure out which one was Woo's. As he moved past the driver's side, a powerful grip seized his face and forcefully pulled him into the vehicle.